Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Russell, and you're watching the Theo Nightly video for the 28th of June here in 2022. We have a big week coming up in a holiday week, 4th of July next week. So we'll have a 4-day week. But before we get there, we have end of the month and end of the quarter coming up. So let's get started with the big picture and then drill down to some individual sectors and, of course, which stocks are in play and the calendar. So a lot to cover. But first, let's pull up the weekly chart on the right of the S&P. Well, what's going on? We had I like to think of things as the COVID crash, or at least that pandemic lockdown, and then the rally up to 4,800, and then the downtrend, bear market, and if you want to call it a recession, that's going to be up for debate, but nonetheless, downtrend is most important. And that helps us put positions and manage. So since that peak in the S&P at least, we've had a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, big lower low. There's the most recent lower high, and that move took us down to our targets in a 3,600 and then back up to play what we call a counter trend. This is from last week's video. We got that target into 3,900, which was a bear market rally, counter trend rally, or whatever you want to call it, as a retracement up into about the middle of that chart. And the bigger picture might look at that from this perspective. And we have, if you think about it, just as mean reversion. That mean, or the midpoint fair valuation, is actually going down. So hitting that target was a good little play on a counterbounce. Again, last week's commentary, but we are at the end of June, and that takes us from there down. So 3,900, roughly speaking, back potentially to new lows. That's your S&P. On the Nasdaq, we are seeing it with similar plays. Won't draw out the levels, but just quick view of it shows it continues the downtrend, as well as the Dow mini futures and the Russell, which is our small cap. I think of interest is how the market's playing off of those lows in the corresponding ETFs. Again, back to the midpoint, midband, or that 20-day average, and then back down. In the context of that, the crude itself, energy prices, energy stocks, and the like, they were the only sector at the end of the session. Now, we did start the session bullishly with a gap up and then a reversal, but the energy sector was the only one to close in the positive. And that, see that here, XLE, which had its big retracement. Again, most commodities have had a deep pullback at the middle and end of June. Energy sector, energy stocks notwithstanding. And the crude market, crude oil at least, continues that uptrend. Big picture is inflation, and it is the only thing that we watch that has a series of higher highs and higher lows. So keep in mind that is a different trend being up, and the same is true for the energy sector and individual stocks within it. In fact, today's leading stocks outside of Qualcomm, which is a tech sector name, and that is just continuing its downtrend, was ConocoPhillips had its bounce, ExxonMobil, and Chevron Texaco. So those were the three. We'll pull back to the Visualize tab. Not a lot to talk about because the energy sector, as bullish as it was, is a very small part. And in fact, if you think about it, the energy sector, in terms of market cap, generally would fit inside of Amazon or Tesla or Apple or Microsoft. So despite having lots of stocks in it, small stocks, the weighting on the index is not as significant as any one of these big monsters of tech. There is the Nasdaq, and that is in large part why the leadership to the downside, in fact, the Nasdaq was off 3% in today's session. That was in large part because of the other side of the market, not the bull side, but the bear side. And the bear side in general, I like to sort by percent change, was Nike. Not necessarily a big stock, but PayPal, again, not a huge stock. Nvidia. But what is big stocks, or are big stocks, are Meta, which is Facebook, still going to call it Facebook. Amazon, in terms of the worst or the biggest decliners in today's session. And Netflix, again, not a huge stock, there it is. And the others played into the lower lows. Tesla was part of that too, and those were off 5%, 5.5%, and 6% respectively. Nike was down 7%. And again, that's when the Nasdaq in large part had the biggest sell-off, or at least the biggest daily bar. It moved more than this because it had an intraday reversal. If we pull that off on the 1-minute chart, that was the reversal of the Nasdaq. The high to low, and that just refers to the opening morning high, was about just above that 12,150. And by the time the bell rang, Nasdaq was off 500 points. S&P was off over 100 from that same play. Now again, that's a bigger picture. We still are in a bear market, and these big pictures still come into play on us trading intraday charts or intraday swings. Of course, swing trades just play off this bigger picture. And the bond market outside of that continues its downtrend with its similar play back to the upside and a fall from its midpoint. So a little bit of similarity with the S&P going lower lows, lower highs, trending down, and of course the bond market, and that's just with the TLT. ZN is going to be the 10-year Treasury note, and then ZB futures contract is the 30-year Treasury bond, and they are all off at lows, which means the TNX, the 10-year Treasury yield, continues its uptrend, and an uptrend is just a series of higher highs and higher lows on the chart. We can connect those off and draw a linear regression, draw the midpoint, etc. It's just a higher high, higher low, and that's just going to form a uptrend. And that's again with the Federal Reserve in general raising rates. They don't control the 10-year Treasury note, but with interest rates going up, bond market going down, we're above that 3% level in the 10-year Treasury note. And one market that has lost its luster has been gold. Gold, if we pull back, this is the hourly chart, which is continuing its trading range, but on the weekly perspective, we've had a long term, that's again back to the COVID lows, lockdown lows, big recovery, big play from 1450 up to 2050, a little bit higher than that, almost 100. But since early 2020, gold market has been between these bounds. And on the daily chart, just back to that 1800 level. Not a lot going on in the gold market, at least from a price perspective. So where are the movements? Where are things focused? In the later part of the week, a couple of things to note, just a few here. Wednesday is going to have a GDP. We're going to have some PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, CPI, PPI. All these things are going to come in. It's just inflationary data and whatever else plays off on the big picture. GDP generally, it's not a big market mover. There's a lot of things that are known in it, at least the components. So we will get the official number coming up. And we'll look at the Chicago PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index right here, take place before the open. And CPI might be a good thing to watch. CPI is the Consumer Price Index, CPI. And again, you can look at thinkorswim here at the Market Watch tab, calendar, and read exactly what the expectation is, and what the actual result is, and how that moves the market. Actual result is not necessarily as important to traders as what happens on the news, particularly with this environment where good news can be bad news and bad news can be good news. So we will, of course, be noting that with any swing trades before the holiday week and before the June month is up. So a lot of things going on still. May not feel like a lot in terms of holiday tape, summer tape, but we are not getting the typical quiet summertime tape. We don't typically have bear markets in stocks either, so there are bigger pictures in focus. And to end the video, I still like to look at stocks making 52-week highs and lows, and I'll sort this back here, just looking at thinkorswim, which stocks, it's a public list, have new yearly highs, and I'll put that in the S&P 500. You can put that to weekly options or stocks with options, weeklies, or in any other sector or watch list you might want to create. Two of them, and they're not big market cap movers, they're Humana and Molson Coors Beverage, TAP. And just a quick glance at those, just to make a note of what is at least somewhat bullish. That's not bullish. That's a sideways trading range, which would be a short or a bear type of play up against the high, not necessarily a strong trender. And the same could be true for TAP. Nonetheless, they did show up in the scan. And there is one stock, and it's a stock we've seen happen a lot, which is just moving to new 52-week lows. Again, today's session was volatile, but we are coming up off the lows. We're not necessarily making lows across the board. But before we conclude and go on to the Wednesday and Thursday and Friday's trading session, let's take a peek at Nike, which is the one stock, at least in the S&P, that did continue the downtrend, and it is on my list of downtrending weak stocks getting weaker with short sell or bear type of plays into the falling averages. Of course, that's going to be in-out spreads or put spreads on the way down. Target will always be the prior low and most likely beneath that. And Nike did have earnings. That is one of the catalysts that can set a trend to reverse or push a stock much lower. It just means volatility. Outside of that, we'll look at the stocks in today's session. Again, Nike down 7%. There it is with a new 52-week low. But these are familiar names. Salesforce.com continues its downtrend. We'll pull that weekly chart and just get a sense of the bigger picture here. PayPal continues its new lows. Stocks that make new lows do have better chances or probabilities to continue making lows, not necessarily reversals. And the sell short, or the trades are the sell short opportunities into falling averages or falling resistance points. NVIDIA is another. Next behind it, see there's retracement trades into Facebook. Biogen is off 5%. These are not stocks making 52-week lows, but they are at their sell points. These are the strongest leaders, or at least the weakest sell side activity to the session. And we'll end with Amazon, which did have it split. Google will have it split. Or Alphabet, Google will have it split coming up. But Amazon has had its split, but the stock does continue making new lows. And that will be a key pivot point just from a round number perspective into 100. As always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Roseman with tonight's Theo video update for June 28th, 2022.